Today we're going to be connecting our quad that we just built in the last video to the computer and configuring it in Betaflight, do the motor remapping, and check if the motor directions are working correctly using BLLE configurator. Um, basically everything that you need to do on the computer to get your quad in the air. Also binding the quad to the transmitter, see if every channel is working, setting up the transmitter, setting up the aux modes. I will set up the aux modes with the most basic setup, but that's not how exactly how I fly my quads. I do have a advanced setup, which probably will be doing in a separate video. Without further ado, let's connect our quad to the computer and let's get on with the configurations.
257.
One tip that I would like to give you guys is once you connect the USB cable to your flight controller, uh, if you have to disconnect or reconnect your quad to the computer, don't try to keep tugging on and off. Once the USB cord is in, just leave it there until all the configuration is done, because the USB plug on the flight controller is pretty small and is really sensitive, and I have broken the USB port on the flight controllers before. So what I would suggest is leave the USB cord connected to the flight controller, and every time you have to disconnect, just disconnect the cable from the USB port on your computer. That's a lot more durable and it'll last a lot longer. So let me connect this to the computer. And if you guys don't have Betaflight and the drivers installed, I will leave a link to a video in the description by Joshua Bartle. He tells you how to set up Betaflight on your computer, install all the drivers and whatnot. I'm not going to do that because that's just redundant. There's a lot more videos on the internet on that topic. So once you connect to Betaflight, you should see the new COM port populated. If that's not working, then probably you'll have to go through all the driver installations. The first thing you want to do once you connect your quad is hit connect. It should load. You can see the target version over here in the firmware 3.5.1, which is pretty old, and you can also confirm it from the CLI by typing in version, and it'll give you the target that you're supposed to flash. Fury F4 OSD, that's our target that we're looking for to flash the new firmware. And once that is done, you could go to the bootloader mode or the DFU mode by typing BL from here on the CLI. It'll go to the DFU mode, or you could just hang on. Let me power cycle this. That's one way. The second way is you could just go to the firmware flasher and select the targets and hit load firmware online and flash the firmware. Sometimes it doesn't work. If it doesn't, go back to the CLI, type BL and press enter. It should go to the DFU mode. That's the bootloader mode for your flight controller, and you should be good to go. Now, as of today, as of me recording this video, Betaflight has come up with 4.3, which is still in development state. I do want to test it out, but make note, this is still in development. There's still going to be a lot of bugs which are still going to be worked on. So if you're not comfortable getting into a development build, I would suggest turn off the show unstable release toggle button, and you could just select the released version. These are all stable versions released. Once you unselect the unstable releases, whatever comes up in these drop down boxes, they're all stable releases. I am going to go ahead and do the development build because I do want to test out Betaflight 4.3 because there's some pretty amazing features in Betaflight 4.3. Again, if you want to see what all new features are there in Betaflight 4.3, I will leave a link in the video description again from UAV Tech. He has done a complete review of Betaflight 4.3 and you should go ahead and check it out. Let's select the Fury F4 OSD. That's our target, and I'm gonna choose Betaflight 4.3, the latest build from the development list. I'm gonna do a full chip array so that it wipes off everything, because since this is a new configuration, I don't really care about anything else. So you're gonna click load firmware online. It's gonna load the firmware, and now you hit flash firmware. Once the firmware has been written successfully onto the flight controller, you should see this programming successful. And at this point, the DFU port should revert back to the previous COM port that you had plugged into. Now at this point, I do not want to directly go into Betaflight. I'm just going to minimize this, and I do want to flash BL Heli as well. That's for the ESCs. Also, since we are running BL Heli S, there's a lot more features available in experimental firmware for BL Heli S called the BL Heli M. Again, another video by UAV Tech which explains all the features in BL Heli M, which I will be using. It is experimental. You don't have to do this. You could go ahead and do a regular BL Heli S, because I'm also going to be using Bi-Directional DSHOT. So that's the reason I'm gonna flash to a higher version of BL Heli. You don't have to do this. You can run the ESCs as it comes out of the box. It'll still work, but some of the features might or may not work. That's the reason I'm upgrading it to BL Heli M. Now the way you do that is you're gonna need BL Heli configurator. This is a special version of BL Heli configurator which is available on the Jazz Maverick GitHub page. I will also leave the link in the description for the same. Again, once you open up Betaflight configurator, you should see the COM port that was being used in Betaflight as well. Make sure you're not connected to Betaflight when you do this, because it's not going to work. Connect. Now at this point, you will have to connect your batteries to your quad, because the ESCs won't power up without a battery. And I suggest you use a smoke stopper at this point. I mean, I know at this point we have already done the smoke test and everything is working, but I still like to use the smoke stopper just to be safe. You should hear the beeps. It should reboot. Click connect. Okay, what's this? It's gonna pop up some warnings. Let me see, what is it? The version of the configurator that you're using is older than the firmware. Oh, yeah. I just realized that this configurator 10.7, it's the release version, and since the new firmware 4.3 is still not supported by 10.7, we gotta have to download and install the new nightly build for a Betaflight configurator. So what you want to do is close up Betaflight, and you'll have to install the nightly build. So the way you install the nightly build is, first of all, you have to go, I'm going to leave a link. So this is where you find the nightly build for the Betaflight configurator 10.8. This is what supports the new Betaflight 4.3. So I'm going to leave the link to this file as well in the video description. Okay, let me download the installer first. This is the Windows version that I'm going to be using. Now, while this is downloading, when you're upgrading the Betaflight configurator, don't just run the installer right away, because that can cause issues sometimes. What you want to do is uninstall the Betaflight that is installed currently on your system, which will remove all the files related to Betaflight, and then do a fresh install. This will just prevent any issues that are caused by overriding new versions of the software. So just do a quick uninstall, and just to verify, go to the Betaflight directory where it's installed in program files, and you see this folder, Betaflight configurator, just delete this folder because you're going to do a fresh install of a new version of the software. You don't want anything from the older version to interfere with that. So once you delete that, just run the installer. It's going to throw a couple of warnings. Say run anyway, install for all users, and UAC authorization, good. Click OK, accept the agreement, default location, next, next, install. Now this could take a while, just wait for it to install and we'll get back once this is done. Once installation is complete, start Betaflight configurator, click finish, and the configurator should load up. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the dark mode because I like the way it looks. Now, COM4 selected, click connect. It's going to show that it's going to say that the accelerometer is not calibrated. Just close this, and way to fix it is just click calibrate accelerometer. So that's done. For now, I think we should be good with Betaflight. We will get back to this after we flash the BL Heli ESCs. So we disconnect. We open up our BL Heli configurator, connect, and at this point, let's connect the battery. Click read setup, and once the setup is read, this is what you should see. And just make sure, just make a note of the ESC version on here, and you're gonna flash a firmware matching this version. So click flash all, and let me just verify. It's CH40. Right now it's on 16.7. That's the BL Heli S latest version. Now we're gonna flash BL Heli M CH40, verify the ESC version, and then the 16.9 is the BL Heli M official version. We have a beta version as well, but we're just gonna go for the latest version and just click flash. Now this is going to take some time. Just let it be. Do not do anything. Just let it finish on its own. And we'll get back once all the 4 ESCs are flashed. Okay, once the flashing is done, just to make sure, click read setup just to refresh everything. And once the reading setup is finished, make sure you set the PWM frequency to 24 kilohertz. Since this is a 5-inch quad, this is the most recommended PWM frequency for it. I'm going to leave async PWM to default. I'm going to leave pretty much everything to default, and just click right setup. No changes. Perfect. And at this point, we can disconnect the ESCs. There you go. The full beeps. So the ESCs are perfectly flashed with the new firmware BL Heli M, and we're going to connect to Betaflight. First thing we're going to do here is go to ports. We'll have to set up our receiver, our smart audio, and our telemetry. So we used UART1. The S-bus on Mamba F405 is going to be on UART1. So we're going to use that for our serial receiver. And we did set up UART3 for our smart audio. So it says IRC tramp, but we're using TBS smart audio. So we're going to do that. And we're going to leave UART6 as of now. Just click save and reboot. Hit connect. Now we're going to have to enable soft serial. For that, we're going to go to configuration. DSHOT 600 for the motor protocol. That's good. I'm going to enable Bi-Directional DSHOT. That's good. Motor poles. On these 2207 motors, I know for a fact that by default it's 14 motors, and I also have counted, but if you're not sure, there's like a bunch of videos from Joshua Bardwell how to count the number of magnets on your motor, so go check that. Motor pulse is good. Motor idle value percentage 3 is kind of low. I'm gonna set it to 5. That's what I like it to be. Pit loop frequency, since we're using bidirectional DSHOT, I think I'm gonna lower it to 4 kilohertz. That's what's recommended for an F4 flight controller. Max arm angle, change it to 180, which will allow you to arm the quad even if it's like flipped over. We're not using barometer, we're not using magnetometer. Craft name. Still undecided about that. So what do we call this? We'll get back to this later. We're going to leave the craft name as is. The receiver is going to be serial based and the protocol is going to be S-Bus. We're going to enable soft serial and we're going to enable telemetry. We're not using LED strips. Just leave everything OSD, air mode. Pretty much everything is fine. And I'm gonna enable RX set beeper because I'm gonna show you how to enable beeper through your motors and ESCs even though you don't have a dedicated beeper on your quad. I'm just gonna leave everything else and click save and reboot. We're gonna save and reboot a lot of times, so might as well get used to it. Click connect again. Configurations, then what else? Soft serial, yes. The way we do that is go to CLI and hit resource. Now we want to find the LED strip because that's what we are using for the telemetry on SmartPort. Now, not the LED 1 and LED 2. I want you to find the resource for LED strip 1. So we're gonna unassign the pin for LED strip 1, and the way we do that is type resource LED strip 1 and type none. This means we're right now it's the LED strip is assigned to the pin A00, and what we just did was freed up the A00 pin. Now we're going to reassign that to a soft serial, and the way we do that is resource serial. We need a serial receiver for our SmartPort. Serial receiver or serial transmitter? No, it's a serial transmitter because we're going to be sending the telemetry to the receiver. The receiver is going to be receiving this telemetry input, and the flight controller is going to be transmitting. So we need a transmitter pin, like a TX pin. And there you go. Should see this. A00 resource is set to A00 and type save and enter. It should save all the configurations and reboot. Now, if we connect and go to ports, we should see a soft serial. And we're going to enable telemetry output SmartPort. And this is going to tell the flight controller to send out SmartPort telemetry over to the LED strip pad, which we enabled soft serial on. Let's save and reboot. And connect. Those motors. Now, we need to verify if all the motors are spinning correctly, and I don't have a camera to actually show you what's actually happening with the motors, but I know for a fact that our motors were jumbled up, and this is where Betaflight 4.3 is gonna be a lot more helpful because in the older days, if you had to like reorder motors, so the way Betaflight works is on your quad, this is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, since we have flipped our ESCs, our order is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 because our ESC is upside down. Now, the way you had to do it in older Betaflights was go to CLI, do the resource, and remap the motors. That you had to physically map the motors, like physically unassign the motor pins on the resources and manually reassign them. So that was a big hassle. With Betaflight 4.3, however, there's this option called reorder motors. It's going to launch a wizard, and it's going to tell you that to take off all the propellers, which we have already done, because this is going to actually spin up the motors. Now at this point you need the battery to be connected because the motors are going to spin up. Just check this box saying that I understand the risk and the propellers are removed the way they are and the way they should be. Click start. Now the motors have started to spin up. As I suspected, motor 3 is spinning when motor 1 is supposed to be spinning. Now I'm going to select which motor is spinning. Now for me, this motor is spinning even though motor 1 is supposed to be. So I just select that. Now it started pulsing motor 2, but actually motor 4 is spinning. So I'm going to click that. Motor 3 is being pulsed, but motor 1 is running. So I'm going to select that. Motor 4 is pulsing, but motor 2 is running. So I'm going to select this. So I'm going to click save. Okay. Select this tab and pulse the motors. Everything is running. And just to verify the order, I'm going to pulse motor 1. Motor 1 is running. Motor 2 is running. Motor 3 is running. And motor 4 is running. So I need to verify the directions now. So I'm going to use the master slider to start the motors to idle up to a speed, and just use a piece of paper and hold it against the motors to see which directions they're spinning. And this is the direction the motors are supposed to be spinning. 1 is supposed to be spinning clockwise, 2 counterclockwise, 3 counterclockwise, 4 clockwise. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to show it on camera. I'm going to go ahead and test the motors and tell you guys exactly what's happening. So motor 1 is spinning clockwise, so that's good. Motor 2 is also spinning clockwise, so we need to reverse motor 2. Motor 3 also clockwise, so motor 2 and 3 need to be reversed. Motor 4 is spinning counterclockwise, so I need to reverse that as well. So let me just verify. Motor 1 is clockwise. Motor 2 is running clockwise, so reverse. Motor 3 is clockwise, so needs to be reversed. Motor 4 is running anti-clockwise, counterclockwise, so that needs to be reversed. So 2, 3, and 4 need to be reversed. Again, in order to do that, we're going to have to go back to BL Heli, disconnect from Betaflight, open up BL Heli, connect, read setup. Once this populates, motor 2 needs to be reversed, 3 needs to be reversed, 4 needs to be reversed. Right setup. Done. And disconnect. Go back to Betaflight, click connect. Let's just verify the motor directions again. Go to motors, click the master slider, spin up the motors to low speed. Motor 1 clockwise, motor 2 counterclockwise, 3 counterclockwise, 4 clockwise. All motors are spinning in the right direction. So motors are done. Let's set up the OSD. And this is good. I'm going to do a simple setup, but this is not what I usually run my OSD with. But if you're building your first quad, or if you're a beginner, these are the minimum that I would like to have on my OSD display. So first thing is, before we set up OSD, since Betaflight 4.0 launched, the VTX is not going to be set up. So we need to first enable the VTX. So how the way you do that is go to the video transmitter tab, and I'm going to leave the link to the VTX table that I have here for US. I mean, you could go to this page and download whichever country that you're flying a quad in or using the VTX in. But since I am in the US, I'm going to be using the VTX table for the US, and I'm going to leave a link to the page where you can download this. I'm just going to open it, and boom, the VTX table is loaded. And I'm going to set the band to race band because that's what I fly usually. Channel 8 and power to 25. And before we save this, we need to verify the power levels on our VTX. So we need to find the exact specific model. So we go to banggood.com to the actual power levels from the manufacturer's page itself. It just says 25 milliwatts and 200 milliwatts. So it only has two power levels. Let's just verify that. Yep, there's only two power levels. So we go back to Betaflight. Number of power levels is going to be 2, 25, 200. That's good. All the channels looks good. How many channels are supported by it? 40 channels. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into 8. That's 40 channels. So we're good. At this point, we're just going to click Save. And gonna disconnect and power cycle the whole thing. That means remove the battery, disconnect it from your computer, just remove the USB cable from the computer. Don't try to yank the USB from the flight controller, because that's the easiest way to break it up. And now, before you plug in the USB, plug in the battery. If the flight controller gets powered without the battery, and I think within like a couple of seconds, if it doesn't get power from the battery, the OSD chip just gets disabled. I don't know if it's a, this is something that Betaflight does. It kind of disables the OSD chip for further use. So now let's connect. Go to video transmitter. Device is not ready. I wonder why. Let's check the ports. Smart audio. It's supposed to be smart audio, right? For some reason, the smart audio is not working. That's odd. Let's verify the cable. Hang on a second. Okay, TX3. That's what we set up smart audio on, but for some reason, it's not working. Okay, let's just verify if the VTX is even working or not. So I would suggest turn on this low power disarm. It means that once the quad is disarmed, the VTX is just going to go to a low power mode. Turn that. So when the quad is disarmed and the motors are not spinning, the VTX is now just sitting there and heating up. So now let's turn on the goggles and see. It's not working. Now, before you connect your flight controller to the computer, you need to plug in the battery because that will power up the OSD chip. The way Betaflight works is if the OSD chip doesn't get power within like the first 2 seconds or 5 seconds of the booting, Betaflight flight controllers, they just disable the OSD chip once and for all. So plug in the battery first, and then plug in your flight controller to the computer and click connect. Now if we go to the video transmitter tab, device ready, yes, that is what you want to be seeing. And if you turn on your goggles and switch to the channel, you should start seeing the video at this point. As you can see, I do have a video feed. See if you guys can see something. There you go. Do have a live video feed. That's our camera. Now we do want to set up the OSD. Now, as you can see, when I reboot, Betaflight OSD should pop up, but it isn't. So go to ports and just hit save and reboot. The OSD isn't set up. So now we're going to set up the OSD. What I would like to set up is the battery average cell voltage. Do I see it? Yep, there you go. The battery cell voltage is there, and I want to set up, we do have a current sensor, so we might as well set up the current meter. What you have to do is drag the components, making sure it's not out of range in the goggles. There you go. So we have battery voltage. We want to use, I do want to set up battery voltage as well. So I'm going to put this right up there. Maybe for the right top. Okay, that's our VTX setup. And you could also change the font. I'm gonna set up clarity because that's the font I like to fly with. Load font, should reboot. There you go. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Probably because of all the light. I should have just recorded the DVR. I don't know why I did not set it up. There you go. OSD setup. Turn off the goggles. Let's see what else is remaining. OSD is done, VTX is done, and I think I'm going to call it an end for now. In the next video, we're going to come back and bind the quad to our transmitter and set up our aux modes, and we'll try to finish up the build and do a test flight. And until then, peace.